The financial press is calling it an oil crisis. Every cable news anchor is calling it a nuclear standoff. They are all describing the right emergency and the wrong story. Here's the story. In the early months of 2026, Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz and makes an announcement that no country has ever made before. If you want your oil tanker through this 21-mile channel, through which 20% of the world's oil flows every single day, you pay in Chinese yuan or bitcoins, not dollars. Oil crosses $125 a barrel. The IMF revises global growth forecasts downward. Shipping insurance markets seize up within hours. What you are watching is not the opening of a crisis, it is the closing of an account. The account was opened in secret in the summer of 1974 in a palace in Jeddah, in 4 days of classified meetings that the US government would spend the next 42 years making sure nobody knew about, and it starts with the night Richard Nixon broke the most consequential financial promise in modern history. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how a secret deal struck in the Saudi desert in 1974 gave the $50 more years of dominance, and why the specific weapon Iran is using in 2026 is the one weapon that deal could never defend against. You will see the complete chain, from the night a president broke his promise, to the morning a bond trader flew to a palace, to the moment a shipping lane became a currency switch. Once you see this chain, the world will look exactly like what it is. Every financial architecture has a founding wound. This one's is August 15th, 1971, a Sunday evening when Richard Nixon goes on national television, interrupts a popular Western program, and tells the world something that no American president has ever said. I have directed the secretary to suspend, temporarily, the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Temporarily. He says temporarily. The gold window has never reopened. What Nixon has just dismantled is the Bretton Woods system, the financial order that 44 nations built in a New Hampshire hotel in 1944, with America at the center. The logic was simple and powerful. The United States holds 2/3 of the world's gold. Every dollar is redeemable for $35 worth of that gold. Every other currency pegs to the dollar. The whole world runs on American gold. For 27 years, it works. Then comes the spending. The Korean War, Vietnam, the Great Society programs. Deficits accumulate, dollars flood the global system. Foreign governments do the arithmetic and begin quietly converting their dollars into physical gold before the vault runs dry. By 1971, American gold reserves have fallen from over 20,000 tons at the end of World War II to just 8,100 tons. Nixon has to stop the run. He stops it by breaking the promise entirely. Here's what makes the crisis that follows inevitable. In a suburban Detroit garage in 1972, a gallon of gasoline costs 36 cents. American cars are getting bigger every year. Heating bills are affordable. The prosperity feels like a permanent feature of the landscape, not a condition that depends on arrangements made in rooms the public will never see. Meanwhile, the oil-producing states of the Arab world are watching their resource, the single most essential commodity in industrial civilization, being sold in a currency that the Americans have just admitted is worth precisely what Washington decides it is worth. The grievance is real, the patience is finite, and in October 1973, both run out at once. October 6, 1973 is Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement. Across Israel, soldiers are fasting, airfields are quiet, command structures are at minimum staffing. Egypt and Syria have chosen this morning with precision. Egyptian forces cross the Suez Canal in massive numbers. Syrian armor rolls into the Golan Heights from the north. In the first hours, the question is not whether Israel can win. The question is whether Israel can survive. Nixon's response is immediate. Operation Nickel Grass, an American military airlift delivering more than 22,000 tons of weapons, tanks, and ammunition directly to Israeli forces. The resupply shifts the battlefield within days, and it sets off the exact chain of events that Henry Kissinger, that year's Nobel Peace Prize laureate, has privately spent months warning the White House about. On October 19, 1973, and the day after Nixon formally requests $2.2 billion in emergency military aid for Israel, King Faisal bin Abdulaziz Al Saud does what no oil producer has ever done to the world's largest economy. Full embargo. Not a reduction. Complete cutoff. No Arab oil to the United States or to any nation that supports Israel's position in this war. Crude oil moves from $3 per barrel in September in 1973 to nearly $12 by January in 1974, a 300% increase in 4 months. U.S. inflation hits 12.3%. Unemployment climbs from 4.6% to 9% by May 1975. GDP contracts 0.5%. The power in this story is an unanchored dollar that cannot absorb what just happened. The pressure is a White House simultaneously consumed by Watergate, running out of both gold and credibility. The price, as it always is in this kind of story, is paid by every ordinary person in every country that cannot manufacture its own fuel, which was almost all of them. Before dawn on a July morning in 1974, a classified flight lifts off from Andrews Air Force Base. Treasury Secretary William Simon is on board. Simon is not a diplomat. He is a chain-smoking bond trader from New Jersey who ran the Treasury Securities Desk at Salomon Brothers, compared himself in conversation to Genghis Khan, and 1 week before this flight publicly called the Shah of Iran, a critical American ally, a nut. Nixon's team sends him anyway, because what is needed in Jeddah is not a diplomat. It is someone who understands exactly what U.S. Treasury bonds are worth to a government sitting on more cash than it knows what to do with. Simon's deputy Jerry Parsky, who later describes the mission to Bloomberg News, puts the instructions in terms that require no interpretation. There was no coming back empty-handed. What Simon builds across 4 days in the coastal Saudi city has 3 components. The United States will buy Saudi oil, Washington will provide military protection to the kingdom, weapons, training, security guarantees, a standing American commitment that no regional rival threatens the House of Saud, and in exchange, Saudi Arabia will take the enormous dollar surplus accumulating in Riyadh from oil sales and recycle it into U.S. Treasury bonds, secretly. The kingdom's holdings will never appear in publicly disclosed Treasury data. Every other foreign creditor's position is published. Saudi Arabia's is carved out and buried. In 2016, Bloomberg News files a Freedom of Information Act request with the National Archives. A diplomatic cable from 1974 surfaces. It shows the condition King Faisal insisted on explicitly. Saudi Arabia's treasury purchases must remain, in the cable's own language, strictly secret. When the data finally comes out, Saudi Arabia holds $117 billion in U.S. government debt, hidden for 42 years. And between 1974 and 1976 alone, Saudi purchases of U.S. treasuries financed 12% of the entire American federal deficit. America is borrowing from the country it has just pledged to protect, and that arrangement creates the conditions for everything that follows. What Simon has built is not a treaty. UBS chief economist Paul Donovan states this directly. The June 1974 public agreement between the US and Saudi Arabia has nothing to do with currencies. The Saudis continue accepting sterling after signing it. What holds the system together is something more durable than paper, a web of interlocking incentives so tight that every participant, acting entirely in their own interest, arrives at the same answer. Saudi Arabia controls swing production for OPEC. When Riyadh prices oil in dollars, the market prices oil in dollars. And when the market prices oil in dollars, every country on earth that needs energy must first acquire dollars to buy it. From 1971 to 2024, the United States runs a current account deficit in 53 of 54 years. Any other country doing this faces a currency collapse. America does not. Follow the money and you find a system that has guaranteed a captive global buyer for American debt at every level of American spending. This is where the chain gets interesting. The same structural power that sustains American dominance carries an assumption built into its foundation that the dollar's role in energy pricing is a permanent condition and not an arrangement that can be disrupted. Which meant that when, in February 2022, Washington froze $300 billion in Russian foreign reserves overnight, every government on earth received the same message simultaneously. Dollar savings held in American institutions belong to Washington on loan, revocable without notice. Saudi Arabia draws the conclusion that the evidence demands. In June 2024, exactly 50 years after the Jeddah deal, the Petrodollar agreement expires. Riyadh does not renew. That same month, Saudi Arabia joins Enbridge, China's digital yuan cross-border payment settlement platform. The cost of 1974 is not paid immediately. It is paid on February 28, 2026. What you are watching in the Strait of Hormuz right now is not a war. It is a renegotiation. Iran has closed the world's most critical energy choke point and placed a price on reopening it. Not in bullets, not in territory, but in currency. Tankers paying in yuan or Bitcoin's pass. Oil sits above $125 a barrel. Nations whose energy budgets were built on affordable petroleum are running out of options. The IMF has revised global growth forecasts downward, and every central bank that spent the last 15 consecutive years quietly accumulating gold is watching to see whether what was once unthinkable is actually happening. Here is what the record shows. Iraq tried to price oil in euros in 2000. American forces arrived in 2003. Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed African currency for oil in 2009. NATO intervention followed in 2011. Both countries' oil returned to dollar pricing almost immediately after their governments fell. The pattern was the message. Challenging the dollar at the source comes with consequences no state can survive. Iran is doing it anyway, because Iran is not using a currency as its weapon, it is using geography. The 1974 deal assumed Hormuz would always be open. It had no answer for the moment when the choke point itself became the bargaining chip. Nixon gave the world a dollar backed by nothing, Simon gave it a dollar backed by oil, and in 2026, Iran gave the world a dollar backed by a question. This story is not over. Every currency crisis, every sanctions decision, every moment a finance minister quietly asks what backs the dollar, now carries the logic of 4 days of classified meetings in a Saudi palace in 1974. That is the kind of chain this channel exists to show you. If you want to understand what is coming before it happens, subscribe. That is exactly what this channel is for. Every crisis has a history. Every history has a ledger. This has been the Meridian Ledger.